Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. And in particular, I'd like to focus our attention on this set, which is Michael Haneke Trilogy, which was released earlier this year by Criterion at spine number 1163. And there are a number of films in this set. Specifically, I'd like to focus on one such film on Blu-ray disc number 3. This is a work which is from the year 1994. And the name of the film, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the German language, I hope you can forgive me, but the name of the film is 71 Fragmente einer Chronologie des Zufalls, or as it's known in English, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. This is the work from the year 1994. It is from the filmmaker Michael Haneke, and it has a really compelling and wide-ranging cast of characters. Included in such cast are people like Marian Radu, Lukács Mikol, and others. This is the work, and once again, please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the language. I hope you can forgive me. 71 Fragmente einer Chronologie des Zufalls, or as it's known in English, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And here we have the direction and screenplay credited to, yes, of course, Michael Haneke from 1994. What a film this is. Once again, this is the third film in this trilogy, and it has 3 discs. And so for purposes of today's discussion, I have displayed the third disc on this side of the casing like so. And so just for your information, the arrangement is situated like that for purposes of our discussion today of this really powerful film. It could be said, if we were to try to focus on the plot or story structure of this, we are focusing in on what could be said to be a myriad of people, a number of people that we are meeting along the way over the course of, we understand, is the latter half or specific points in 1993. And we also understand immediately that we are dealing with some kind of mass shooting incident. This is revealed to us from the very get-go, and it's revealed to us in a type of title card description. And then from there, we are given, or we are confronted with, or we are asked to deal with or manage or process various forms of images and stories and sounds and environments and characters. Now, among those characters we have, for example, a young boy who we understand has an immigrant background, and also we have other characters that we meet, an elderly man in a household who seems to be maybe experiencing some kind of loss or yearning, or maybe seeking out some companionship of some sort. We also have another gentleman who has something to do with security in a bank. There are also some people who are somehow associated with a bank, including maybe a bank teller or other people who work at the particular bank that we see somewhat early on. There are also a couple that is involved in wanting to adopt a child, and also the adoption process, and also the young child in question. Also, there's a story involving a young man who seems to be, or appears to be, a student. Also is someone who seems to be very skilled at table tennis. As well as other, say, details or stories or incidents or situations or circumstances that go along the way. And this, I think, speaks to the the structural conceit of the film giving rise to the title, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And so what we can glean from this is this idea of a type of tapestry, network, lattice work, a maybe cross-section of a particular community or points of a community, or maybe cross-sections of various aspects of different communities that seem to be either, I say cross-section, that seem to be either interconnecting with each other, or perhaps there is a type of randomness or a type of, say, a feeling of disconnectivity between and among these particular players. And so we as viewers are asked to not only digest and process the various clinically presented precision-based pieces of, say, evidence and information throughout the form of this film and the various stories as we see them unfold in a type of methodical manner. We are, of course, asked to digest and process this information, but also, I think, as a type of broad stroke sense of maybe implicit question that's being asked, is we are also meant to, or we also may be asked to ponder and question and wonder what it is about these various seemingly disconnected storylines that has perhaps a sense of a thematic or maybe even plot-driven continuity between and among each other, if at all. So therein lies, I think, a type of inherent curiosity that's embedded within the actual structure itself. That's making, I think, itself a very compelling piece of work indeed. I should say also that we have another level of this film, which is various aspects of, say, modern day living, modern city living. We also understand that this is the part of, this is Austria, Vienna, and various aspects of Vienna, both in terms of maybe a sort of a residential living space, as well as a professional or commercial workspace, also the streets, also academia, as well as various, say, strata of lives and livelihoods, and perhaps even class and social backgrounds as well that seem to be represented in one form or another. So in this way, we can see already a type of lattice work construction that is very much akin to a number of the films that we had seen in the previous discussions of this trilogy, namely Benny's Video and also The Seventh Continent. However, we can also see a type of variation on a theme in that while the other films could be said to be dealing in one form or another with an intimate family unit, here, one we can say is that this film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, is dealing with a network of seemingly disconnected persons within the framework of this society. So here, and I say seemingly disconnected because we are left to wonder, as I say, whether or not there are indeed connections that can be had, both maybe figuratively or literally. So that is again part of the maybe the cinematic appeal of this film that I would argue has many points of cinematic appeal, as well as many points of challenge and provocation. That is, I think, part of the cinema viewing experience of the works of Michael Haneke. So there is one level that I think exists very, very confidently and quite astutely in that department indeed. And also I made mention of the fact that this is situated in a specific place and time, early 1990s Vienna, Austria. And so we have therefore the opportunity for a type of dialogue or discussion that opens up the space with respect to media and mass media consumption, because also one of the conceits that we find early on in the film introduced is the way in which news footage and current events seem to be embodied within the culture and either emboldening the viewership or perhaps creating a sense of a type of maybe numbness to the type of a very intense and quite seemingly violent and quite horrific and frightening details of the news events that are being relayed to us, while at the same time establishing a sense of distance because they are being relayed to us in this newsroom, news broadcast fashion. So here we also have one of the great ironies that exists in other Haneke works and exists here as well, namely this idea of destabilization. The things that we are being asked to digest in terms of these news reports themselves are actually very, very intense and very tragic events and very violent events indeed. War, or battle, military conflicts. Specific references are made, for example, to Lebanon or to Somalia or Bosnia or to Turkey, the Turkish Kurdish conflicts, etc. So these various military conflicts are being referred to, as well as other quite maybe controversial news programs or news reports of the day, for example, stories involving, say, Michael Jackson, etc. So these are part of the milieu of the news broadcast cycle that is embedded within the actual construct of this work, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And it's introduced in a way that is a very interesting one. It's introduced in a way that is multi-textured, in that it sets the scene for the environment in which the society that we see depicted in this film is living, because in a sense this is the news of the day. This is the news of the day that is then transmitted to us, not directly, not through actual direct experience, but rather through this indirect method of the news broadcast transmitted via television broadcast. And so here we have this sense of destabilization. That which is being talked about is quite intense and tragic and filled with controversy and violence indeed. However, it is presented in a way that could be said to be quite maybe numbing, or maybe it is so distancing to the sense, to the effect that maybe the viewership, those who are the consumers in this mass market consumption market, that is mass media, as presented in Haneke's work here. The viewership is in a state of not necessarily fully being able to realize or detect the actual tragedy on display, because of this almost insurmountable distance that's established by virtue of, or because of, or due to the fact of the application of mass media in this form. So here we have this destabilization effect, the idea or hypothesis of a type of malleability or a type of manipulation of reality that makes it also in these sort of bite-sized consumable chunks. And what is it about bite-sized consumable chunks that is perhaps quite appealing in one way, but perhaps also distracting and disturbing in another way, is that through these bite-sized consumable chunks, they might be consumed, but they also might be forgotten very quickly or explained away very quickly, which is, I think, also one of the hearts of the hypotheses of Michael Haneke and the way in which media operates, or the way in which media is applied, or the way in which we as viewers react to the media, or perhaps the media awakens something that is already within us to at the very outset. So this idea of sympathy, empathy, or lack thereof, and whether that lack thereof is done on purpose or it was innately there to begin with. Again, these are part of the roots of analysis and interpretation that one can choose to go on depending on one's reading as one is watching a film like 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. So that's one level that I think leads to some very compelling and quite potentially disturbing outlets and results. But those disturbing outlets or results, I think, should be encouraged in terms of furthering of a discussion, because that's one of the great strengths of this work, is that it encourages such discussion. And within the space of the viewership of this cinematic work of art, we're then allowed to then ponder and consider and perhaps make certain considerations that may have an overall effect going forward. But this is one of the great strengths of this and the other works, indeed, of Haneke. That's one level. And another level, too, is the way in which this type of a cause and effect relationship may or may not exist in terms of what we might call the externalities and what we might call the internalities of the story and the storylines that we see presented in this film. After all, as I mentioned earlier, and I think one of the hypotheses of that Haneke posits is that it is easy to externalize say, maybe military conflict or war abroad, or certain news events that might be said to be controversial or disturbing or violent, etc., because they are presented in this news fashion, the video format or the TV format. Also, they are presented in a way that is explained away in terms of quickly digestible reasoning. And that quickly digestible reasoning may or may not always be correct. It may be correct, but it may not always be correct. It may not always hit accurately on the truth itself. However, because of the distance that occurs between the observer and the actual event itself, the observer is oftentimes not in the position to be able to question further. But a film like 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, I think, puts that full front and center for us to consider and ponder, because we are left to wonder, is it really the case that the events that we see in this film are these events that things that can be explained away in these sort of bite-sized digestible chunks to then be digested and then forgotten? Or is there something more inherently, say, disturbing, or something more inherently cause-effect related that is at work here, that could be said to be integral, or maybe even embodied within the actual societal structure that we all live in? If that's the case, then the quote-unquote demons, or the quote-unquote root causes of these malicious acts might be closer to home than we might realize, and they might be too close for comfort, in a manner of speaking. If that's the case, that's also cause for much, I think, lively and valuable discussion and debate in terms of cause and effect. And of course, the idea here, cause and effect, externalities, internalities, is the root cause of the things that we see, something that is outside of ourselves, outside of the society that we live in? Or is the root cause something closer to home, closer to the heart, closer to within, closer to the internal? If it's the former, then we go along with that in terms of a reading of that interpretation going forward. But if it's the latter, then we also have to take that in consideration and take that reading to the fullest extent of that consequence. And so in this film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, I think, puts that on display very vividly, because it does posit the possibility, at least, of a type of cause and effect relationship. It might not be direct. It might not be, one level removed, but it might be, say, a number of levels removed, or might be even, say, so many levels removed to perhaps be, almost imperceptible. But arguably speaking, it is there, or at the very least, there is, by virtue of the structure of the latticework network tapestry of various pockets of society that are being depicted seemingly all at once, there is the possibility, at least, of a reading of this film such that the cause and effect of the actual events that we see depicted in one form or another in this film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, could be said to be directly derived from, or related to, or as a result of certain causal factors that we can say are identified throughout the film, say elsewhere, or in other parts, say in other parts of this network, lattice work of character and situations that we see presented inherently or integrally in this structure. So that also is a very powerful hypothesis, indeed, or at the very least, it is a very powerful mode of interpretation and reading that we can see here. And indeed, too, that type of idea of cause and effect, the distance between cause and effect, or perhaps the closing of the distance between cause and effect. What are the causes and what are the effects? This can also be said to be a hypothesis that also has certain, maybe robust value in earlier films like The Seventh Continent and Benny's Video, and now take into this context, which is almost a cross-section of various pockets of society in Vienna in the early 1990s. And so in that way, too, we have, one can say, a continuation of the hypothesis, or the hypotheses of Haneke, while also presenting in various, precision mode, almost expose pieces, this type of structure that is very cinematic and very, I think, it creates a sense of curiosity in us, the viewer, as well as bringing us, I think, quite directly to considerations about the wide reach of externalities and internalities of both society and psychology, and also the effect of media and news culture, and the consumability of news culture, and also the effect of, say, the individual in the society writ large, as well as what are the root causes of, quote unquote, the ills of society, and whether those root causes are totally outside on the extreme, or perhaps they are closer to home, and more closer to home, too close to comfort, in a manner of speaking. So these, as well as linking these to a sense of a type of maybe current event or a sense of currency in the current events of the 1990s, 1990s Austria, also 1990s in terms of the European stage writ large, and also globally. And so if we take this film in terms of the cross-section of society and the randomness or the interconnections between and among the various people, thus the extension of the hypothesis of cause and effect, then this idea of cause and effect, of course, it could be confined to a specific space and time, but it doesn't have to be. And indeed, by taking these events into question, and understanding that these are not isolated events, or potentially they're not isolated events, but this is just one example of many news reports that are read about and that are commented on and that are reported on. This could be perhaps but one of many types of, say, points of connection. And if that's the case, that leads to, I think, some very chilling and some very frightening and quite provocative roads of further debate and discussion indeed. So there is so much in terms of the focal points of consideration at play here, while presenting a world that is maybe filled with people, characters, human beings that have a sense of longing, a sense of desire, a sense of maybe hope and trajectory in their lives and in their professions. And that's another strength too of the Haneke work that I do want to highlight. We saw it in other films that we have in this trilogy set, Seventh Continent, Benny's Video. These are films about people. These are films about human beings who have lives, who have families, who have connections, who have friends, who have things to do in their life, the cycle, the routine. And that cycle and routine, it might be presented in a very clinical and maybe almost even repetitive sort of way, but that's not to take anything away from the importance and significance of these routines and these rituals and these things that belong to their lives. And indeed, they remind us too of the things that we do in our lives as well that have a certain sense of significance and meaning attached to them, because of what it is they mean to us, or why it is we do the things that we do. So because they're repetitive doesn't mean that they are bereft of any kind of meaning or significance, which is another way to say that Haneke's works, including 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, focus on human beings. And because of that, I think the impact of what happens to these human beings that we meet and get to know and maybe become very close to, the impact of what happens to these human beings is very impactful and very significant indeed, and we feel it. We really feel it as viewers of this film. That is one of the great strengths of this film, is that the impact that this has when things occur the way they occur is very chilling, and it's very startling, and it jolts, and that jolt and startling and confrontational nature is, I think, purposefully designed, and it's meant to be that way. And it's that combination of a strict adherence to a highly precise design, as well as a recognition of the emotional and psychological stakes on display, as well as recognition of the possibilities of the scope of cause and effect that take place, that have an effect on the immediate and intimate, but also have an effect on the broad and macro scale, on a societal scale, perhaps even, yes, on a global scale. This type of reach of cause and effect, I think, is at the very heart, or the potential thereof is at the very heart of consideration of this incredibly powerful work of art from Michael Haneke. It is this film, which is 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. The Criterion Collection has released this film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, on this Blu-ray. This is the third Blu-ray disc of the 3-disc Blu-ray set, Michael Haneke trilogy. And once again, let me read from one of the pages of this booklet. On page 20, it says, "About the Masters, the Seventh Continent, Benny's Video, and 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance are presented in their original aspect ratio of 1.66 to 1, supervised by director Michael Haneke. These digital masters were created in high definition from the 35mm original camera negatives." And just like my experience with the other works of Seventh Continent and Benny's Video, I can say that my experience with this film through this Criterion release is, while I cannot necessarily detect anything strikingly advanced or different in terms of the viewing experience as I watched it on this Criterion disc versus how I watched it on, say, previous releases of this work, All the same, previous releases have always maintained a type of sense of fidelity of style, Haneke style, which I think is preserved here with this film as well as the other films. So this is, I think, a real great opportunity for those who are interested in pursuing a Haneke film journey, starting with these very challenging, very intense works such as 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. So if you are interested in getting these films for the first time in particular, then this I think is a great place to go in terms of that Hanukkah journey, including this very powerful film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. But now let's turn to the discs supplements. As we have seen with the other discs in the set, this third disc has the feature film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, and also it has certain supplements linked to it. Now, what are those supplements that are found on the third disc? So first up is, like with the previous discs, we have a one-on-one discussion from 2005 with Michael Haneke, Sergei Tobiana, and Michael Haneke. This is approximately 23 minutes. Just like the others were focusing in on the specific films, Seventh Continent and Benny's Video, here we have a discussion from Haneke about 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And here there's discussion about, say, how the spectrum is, in their words, it's enlarged or widened in a manner of speaking. Again, if we were to try to find a thematic conceit that runs through all of these three films, it's maybe an exploration, examination of a certain, say, pocket or segment of society or some kind of societal grouping, whether it be the family unit that we see in certain representations in the Seventh Continent, or the family unit, again, in maybe similar yet different situations in the film Benny's Video. Here we have units, various units that are displayed all at once. So we have families of various characters in one form or another, or individual characters in one form or another, or perhaps a hybrid or combination of both in one form or another, various pockets of society, various aspects of society, and various aspects of societies, plural as well, in this film. 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. So I think that's where the expansion of the thematic concerns go. So, and also this allows for, in many ways, a type of changing of points of view, changing points of view between or among one character to another character to another character, because it has that type of portmanteau type of feel to it, and type of omnibus or portmanteau type of feel to it, or short story type of feel to it. And you have various short stories, in a manner of speaking, linked or not linked, as the case may or may not be, in these various formats. But they are linked in terms of a progression of scenes in the cinematic form of this work by Haneke. So there's that aspect to it as well. And so we have seen, of course, how changing points of view have been expressed in other films. I would say, for example, even Benny's Video, we saw arguably a kind of change in a point of view between, say, one member of the family and, say, other members of the family, in terms of maybe discussions, maybe even on a type of a plot-driven or even conspiratorial level. But in any event, this changing point of view is also quite present, even ever present, in the context of this film, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And so Haneke here mentions this as a type of a different mode of exploration, in a manner of speaking. It's quite a mode, and quite a bold mode to be in, and he handles it with such skill and grace and directness and genius. So this is quite brilliant indeed. Then also there are other comments here too about, say, the idea of communication, and how communication, or lack thereof, or the ability or inability to communicate, is indeed one of the themes that's existing here between and among the characters that we meet in 71 Fragments of the Chronology of Chance. So I think this is very apropos, because we also have the idea of what is being said, or what we hear, is sometimes linked to directly with what we see, but oftentimes too, what we hear and what we hear being spoken, or what we hear in terms of noises, may or may not always correspond directly with the images that we are seeing, or the scenes that we are experiencing going forward. I mean, case in point, we can wonder and question how say how certain characters how they're speaking to other characters, say over the phone, how that might or might not be directly relevant to how they're feeling in the moment. There are some also moments in this film where you have two characters, say, sitting at a table eating, and they are not necessarily facing each other, but there's a moment perhaps of truth or potential truth that maybe one character is trying to speak to another character. And the question in the scene is whether or not that truth, whatever it may be, however imperceptible it may be, whether it can be correctly and accurately conveyed to the other or not, and what the consequences are if you go in one direction or the other. So this idea of communication or lack thereof, or ability or inability to communicate, is so important, because also one can say that because or due to the ability or inability to communicate, we can have various, say, seemingly subtle or perhaps even quite dramatically significant ramifications in terms of plot and also in terms of what happens to certain characters. So this idea of communication is one of the key themes here, and also arguably in the other films in this trilogy. So well done for being able to present this. Also another point here is that, again, Michael Haneke, to his credit, says here that he on purpose wants to make this film, in terms of the structure of the plot, in a way such that it doesn't provide easy solutions. And I think this is really important, and it's not it's of course important in a number of aspects, I would say. One aspect is the way in which Haneke is as a storyteller. I think we can get a sense of the rhythm of Haneke's storytelling technique, and also his the traits of his storytelling in the context of, say, the other films, The Seventh Continent and Benny's Video, and now this 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, because we have this idea of the presentation of information, and the idea of almost a slice of life, a day in the life type of capturing of certain moments, fly on the wall, day in the life type of filmmaking. That also has a sense of directness. That also isn't afraid to venture into realms of, say, the surreal, or perhaps even the poetic, the quite cinematically poetic, in terms of different lenses or different, say, formats and changes, or different landscapes that are suddenly shifted to, etc. So it has a very kind of flexible feel, Haneke cinema does. So in that way. But there's a way in which his storytelling technique, at least in the context of these films, presents information, presents questions, presents situations and circumstances, and yes, indeed, conflicts, but doesn't always present the reasons exactly why it happens. This has happened because of that. X has happened because of Y. It's not that way at all. There are clues, or there are possibilities that we are then asked to question and wonder about, but it's not like the film is giving us a be-all, end-all solution to the entire happenings of this particular matter. So this is, I think, very purposefully done, and it's done, I think, very gracefully, and it's also done as in a matter, one can say, of a reflection of the storytelling technique of Haneke. Also, on another level, one can say that this is done in order to call attention to maybe the futile nature of trying to draw certain conclusions or inferences to current events or news reports as they happen. After all, what is the extent of sympathy or empathy when one is engaging with or digesting pieces of news in this fashion? Is it really possible to fully understand and comprehend what happened, why things happened the way they happened? Or is it virtually impossible because of the distance that's created due to the very nature of media itself? And if that's the case, then is it up to films like Haneke's 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, which not only recognizes and identifies this distance, but also recognizes and identifies perhaps the futility of trying to find answers to the questions. And in that recognition, perhaps there is a key towards the way forward in trying to find, again, a resolution to what are I think, quite obviously issues of society, especially when we're dealing with things that are so high stakes, life and death types of stakes. And so I think in that type of recognition of distance, and also maybe isolation, and also the perhaps arguably the futility of trying to seek quick and easy answers, this recognition alone becomes, I think, a strength point that then enables the viewer to recognize, or at least have a discussion or debate about then what is the way forward, and what is the means by which after one recognizes this perhaps a cause and effect display, what is the solution, if at all? Perhaps there is no solution. Perhaps it is all in the recognition of the issue. But whatever the case is, this is, I think, a very important concept, which is the films do not present easy solutions, and that's part of the point of this and the other films. Very, very crucial. And also to the depiction of violence. One can say that this film, and indeed the other films in this trilogy, are encompassing scenes that are very intense, very unsettling, and so intense and so unsettling that they are not for everyone. These films are not for everyone, that's for sure. However, there's also a technique, and there's also a way in which the horrific and the horrifying is being presented and represented by Haneke cinema. Note here the way in which violent scenes are depicted. There is a type of technique that's being employed such that the impact is really felt so profoundly through cinematic means that perhaps use framing techniques and styles such that we are not shown every single detail per se. But we are given the information, and we can therefore, there's a type of almost power of imagination that is also at work that makes the impact all the more horrifying and all the more terrifying, and thus making for, I think, very profoundly significant viewing experience of this and other works by Haneke. So there's a way in which certain scenes of intensity and certain scenes of unsettling violence are depicted here and other films, I think makes for more, say, more points of discussion as to the value and the brilliant craft that is at play in the cinema of Michael Haneke. So for these and other reasons, this discussion is like the other discussions with Haneke. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So please check it out if you can. This is approximately 23 minutes, again, from the year 2005. And then that's not all, because then we have a feature-length documentary. This is described as being from the year 2013. This is really great. This is called Michael H., Profession Director. This is from the year 2013, approximately 1 hour and 32 minutes. And so we have a type of catalog, or going through the films, the works of Haneke, in a kind of reverse chronological order, in a manner of speaking. We start with his most recent works, circa 2013, and then we go chronologically back, more or less. There's an exception here or there, but we more or less cover all the films going in this reverse chronological order, going into other works, discussions like, say, The White Ribbon, or Time of the Wolf, or The Piano Teacher, and then going into discussions of this trilogy of sorts. So the 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, and then Benny's Video, and then The Seventh Continent, etc. So we have this sense of reverse chronology, which I think is a really interesting touch. It has this, it reminds me of a specific scene at the very start of the film, Benny's Video, in terms of a videotape, something that's shot on videotape, and it's played forward and it's reversed backwards. So it's an interesting, I don't know if it's an interesting play on this idea of a reversal going backwards in time, in a manner of speaking, while also suggesting a sense of propulsion forward. So if one is looking for a primer on the works of Michael Haneke, starting or up to or current as of the year circa 2013, this is a brilliant place to go. We have a number of the players and actors involved in a number of his works that are also being interviewed in the context of, say, their work in those given films, etc., as well as words from Haneke himself. And the idea, too, some aspects that are brought up in this really great documentary are, for instance, the rehearsal process that Haneke employs, working with Haneke, his on-set demeanor, and he has a type of, reputation that may or may not be accurate, in a manner of speaking. He seems to be very exacting, but also there's a sense of an attention to precision, and we also see certain scenes and behind the scenes footage of him working on the set, working with actors, certain shots being prepared and then laid out, etc. So this is, I think, And also, there's an interesting interplay in terms of one of the questions or one of the moments in the film, in this documentary, where he's asked questions about what his intentions were for a given project, and he visibly becomes somewhat, I don't want to say agitated, but he becomes resistant to follow such a line of questioning, because it's, for him, it's not the idea of wanting to talk about intentions versus talking about the craft or certain choices in terms of style, etc. So this is a very interesting turn of the documentary, because it does show, or it is consistent with what we have seen elsewhere in the supplements for this film and the other discs in the set, namely this idea of the possibility of interpretation and the way in which no easy solutions are being presented. And that is the point, that the films are structurally designed in such manner in order to provide us, the viewers, with the room to interpret. And we can therefore go to various, maybe multiple readings at once. Interpretations of a given film. And so rather than say, in terms of how Michael Haneke might put it, rather than have the filmmaker's view or interpretation be imposed upon us, we are given the ability and benefit of being able to interpret based on all the bits of information that we are being presented as we watch a film, like 71 Fragments of the Chronology of Chance, or his other works for that matter. So this is, really quite, I think, very insightful in terms of the philosophy of Haneke, his cinematic philosophy, and the like. So very valuable indeed, and also other mentions of other works as well. Code Unknown is, I mean, if you want to speak to, for instance, a great, maybe a great work that one can watch in terms of a nice, maybe a way which maybe the structure could be said to be somewhat similar, and yet also I think there are some unique stylistic differences as well. One can say, refer to a film like Code Unknown in the context of one's discovery and further, say, exploration of a work like 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, including, in particular, for example, the mode of, say, changing perspectives or changing points of view, which is a really key aspect of this film, and it can be said a really key aspect of a work like Code Unknown and the other works in the Michael Haneke canon. So for these and other reasons, this documentary is really, really fantastic. So please check out this documentary if you can. This is approximately 1 hour and 32 minutes from around 2013. And then last but not least, we have a trailer for 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. Now, usually I'm okay with watching trailers. I think trailers are very valuable. However, I think that based on, it's a very brief trailer, but the trailer for that's included here actually could be said to be showing a scene that occurs around the climax of the film. And so I think if one wants to be, say, totally, say, free from any type of, say, spoilerish type of stuff, on the one hand, I would probably say it might be a good idea to maybe not watch the trailer, maybe watch the trailer after you've seen the film. At the same time, it's I don't see any huge detriment to seeing the trailer first because of the nature of the film in terms of what we know, the information that we have at the very start of the film. The film that opens with a certain kind of explanatory title card. And so we have information. And it could be said, if we have that information at the start of the film, then watching the trailer designed in that way, it doesn't really give anything away in a manner of speaking, because we already know the information when we start the film proper. So in that way, there's no maybe direct, I don't want to, maybe there's no direct harm in a manner of speaking if one watches the trailer first. However, my personal suggestion is, it's a great trailer. It's really quite evocative, very clever. But my personal suggestion is, if you can avoid it, maybe watch the film first and then watch the trailer. Because I think that order is probably much better in terms of preserving a sense of, say, surprise, or sense of the, especially for a first-time watch of this work, 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. So, but it's a great trailer, don't get me wrong. I think it's good to have. So great for Criterion to be able to include it in this manner. So that rounds out the supplements with regard to this work, Blu-ray disc number 3, which has the film 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. And then just concluding this conversation, let me just make brief reference to this booklet. The booklet has a section that is devoted to each of the films at the beginning, with a little write-up for each of the films and a little write-up in terms of the cast and crew. And that certainly holds true for 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance, which the section of which can be found here. But then after this, we have a comprehensive essay that's covering all of the films within the so-called trilogy. So let us save our comments on the essay, the overall comprehensive essay, and also overall final comments on this release writ large. Let's save those for the next and last video in this discussion run on the Michael Haneke trilogy. But it's a great essay and it's a great booklet, and it accompanies this set, which includes the third Blu-ray disc, which has this very compelling and very challenging work indeed, which is, again, the great strength and also the great, say, almost a sense of cinematic provocation that is also has points of accessibility that make it so rich topic, and also very cinematically engaging indeed. This is the work from Michael Haneke, which is 71 Fragments of a Chronology of Chance. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we see each other again at the next video, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies. So until the next time, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.